Question number 2. According to Shuttleworth and Cobb 2022, evidence-based practice includes, in part, implementation of findings of well-conducted quality research studies. So being able to critique quantitative research is an important skill for researchers, consideration must be given not only to results of the study, but also the rigor of research. The rigor refers to the extent to which researchers have to enhance the quality of studies. In quantitative research, this is achieved through measurement of validity and reliability. Validity is defined as the extent to which the concept is accurately measured in a quantitative study. For example, a survey designed to explore depression must actually measure anxiety would not be valid. The second measure of validity in quantitative studies is reliability. In other words, the quantitative research instrument consistently has the same results if it's used in the same situation on repeated occasions. Okay, explain the main types of bias that threaten validity and reliability. Analyze the challenges of using standardized instruments in a research study. Explain the ways in which reliability coefficient in a research study can be increased. Okay, we've been done doing this question in all the 3 papers it has come. So what are the main types of bias?
Response.
Recall bias.
Recall bias,
Measurement.
measurement, response,
Selection.
Selection,
Publication.
Observer.
Something.
Right. So selection occurs when the participants are not randomly selected, so it will lead to non-representative of the sample. Measurement arises from errors in the collection tool and procedure. Response bias happens when participants answer questions dishonestly due to social desirability. Observer bias when the researcher's expectations influence the reading or interpretation. Recall when they cannot remember. Confirmation bias when researchers focus on data that supports what? Their hypothesis. And this is one mistake that most of you make. Instrumentation bias when the changes in instrument measurement or procedures over time affect the consistency or comparability of data. Okay? Did you know that when you are doing a rapid test or even an HIV test, after some time, you discover that a result that was negative becomes positive due to environmental, maybe water and moisture? What kind of bias would that from these that have been enlisted? What would that error emanate from?
Could it be instrumentation or measurement bias?
Instrumentation or measurement bias? Instrumentation. Okay. Question part B.
Mr.
Analyze.
Collins, sorry, I'm not able to see the screen. I don't know if others are seeing it.
Are you seeing the screen, the rest of you?
Yes,
Yes.
we are. I'm able to see.
It could be your network.
Yes. Just your network.
Analyze the challenges of using standardized instruments in a research study. What are some of the challenges of using a standardized instrument? We had discussed this yesterday. What is a standardized instrument? A general tool that could be used everywhere, okay? What are the challenges of using a standardized research instrument in a research study? Okay, there are so many challenges that may
Maybe
come.
not for all the population.
I was saying it might not be appropriate for all the population.
Yes, appropriateness. Yes, it might not be appropriate for all populations. Cultural relevance. So standardized tools may not be appropriate across different cultural or linguistic contexts. Then limited flexibility. It may not account for a specific context, specific factors limiting the usefulness. Some instruments may be outdated if not regularly revised. Misinterpretation, participants may misinterpret standards questions, leading to inaccurate responses. Access and cost. Some standardized instruments may require licensing, training, and may pose what? Financial challenges. Incompatibility. Some instruments may not fully align with specific objectives. Okay, so some things may not even match with different. So there are many challenges that you will face with standardizing of instruments. It also has advantages. Suppose you're asked to explain what are the advantages of using standardized instruments. I think we also discussed that maybe before we proceed. What are some of the advantages of using standardized instruments in a research study? Okay, reliability. So when you're using standardized instruments, may test the reliability. Validity, also most of the established instruments there will accurately measure the construct that you're looking for. Comparability is also another advantage that you may have. Reduced bias is another advantage that you may have. So you also need to look at it from two angles there. So standardized instruments like questionnaires may have their own advantages and disadvantages. So reliability, validity, comparability, cost effectiveness, okay? So it requires time to test reliability. So if you're having already standardized instrument, meaning it's already tested, it also reduces bias. Is that clear? So part C, ways in which reliability coefficient in a research study can be increased. How do we increase reliability? We talked about this quickly. How do we increase
You
reliability?
increase the test length.
You conduct a pilot test, yes? One of ways. You increase the number of items that are being,
Is that triangulation?
yes, doing triangulation. Okay. So we talked about a number of ways in which you're going to increase. Number one, you use clear and concise instruments that will ensure questions are measured using tools that are not ambiguous. Okay, standardization procedure. You need to keep data collection methods consistent across all participants. Training researchers, you need to ensure that the collectors, the field workers are trained. Pilot testing, I talked about this, that you need to conduct a pilot test to identify and rectify issues. Increase the number of items. This increases what kind of reliability? So you use more internal consistency. So increasing the number of items. So using more items to measure a concept will increase internal consistency. Then also improving scoring methods using objective and well-defined scoring criteria. Then repeated measures, administering instruments over time to check on consistency. All right. So these are ways in which we can increase what? Our reliability coefficient. So the preamble, the consumption framework doesn't change. The preamble of all these questions is the same. What just changes is the conceptual framework that they're going to give you. Okay. So here is a conceptual framework that we've been given. I think we did this at some point. So we are being asked to, is this clear? So that's our conceptual framework. Let me just read the question again. The conceptual framework lives at the center of empirical study. Conceptual framework serves as a guide in the balance of research, functioning as an integrating ecosystem that helps researchers intentionally bring all aspects through the process that explicates the connections and conjunctions and overlaps tensions. As a qualitative researcher, it is vital to understand what conceptual framework is, what its component parts are, and how they interact, and how it's used to guide high quality. Keeping that in mind, Mr. Brian Mumba is proposing a research study as follows. So we have this conceptual framework. So this formulated title for this: identify the variables and come up with the statistical processes and the role that theoretical framework has in developing conceptual framework. So this is the qualitative research lecture. So what topic can we come up with here on this conceptual framework?
Can I give it a try?
Yes.
Okay, we start with the independent variables, the interrelationship between, we have leadership, motivation, organization, culture, work satisfaction, and you say and employee performance as the dependent variable.
So what is the topic? You're starting with the topic, isn't it?
Yes,
What's the topic?
that's
So
the
you've identified
interrelation.
that. You're starting by identifying the variables, which is also a smart way of doing it. So these are independent variable 1, independent variable 2, independent variable 3. Okay, which other variable do you have? So these are dependent variable. This one can also be an independent variable, a moderating variable as well, and a dependent variable if you want. It can be 3 things. All right. So all these can end here, or they can pass through this guy to end here. Everything is ending there. So depending on what topic you want to choose, you can relate with that. Okay, so we've looked at the variables that are there. So we can either say the impact of motivation, leadership, and organization culture on employee performance. Then we factor out work satisfaction. So the mediating role of work satisfaction. This is one of the best and intelligent ways of coming up with a topic. Or examining the influence of organizational culture, leadership, and motivation on work satisfaction and job performance. So this means that these two become what? The result, the dependent variables. Are you getting that? The second topic,
Yes.
the first topic suggests that these are the independent variables, and this was the dependent variable, and this one's the mediating variable. The second topic simply says these are the independent variables and these are the dependent variables, both of them. All right? Then you can also come up with a topic to say work satisfaction as a mediator between workplace factors and employee performance. So you just generalize them. These are workplace factors and employee performance. So this one as a mediator. A study of how leadership, organization culture, and motivation affect output through job satisfaction. Then the role of internal workplace factors in enhancing job satisfaction and performance, like conceptual and empirical. So which one are we going to pick?
Let's go for 1.
Okay, so we go for topic 1. Are we all agreeing? Can move to topic 1?
Just a question, Collins. If we are going for one, I would just like to hear from you, because if I can remember very well, the lecturer was mentioning something like you need to use keywords like examine, investigate, and all that. So the way one is phrased like that, is it okay, or you need to actually add a word like maybe examine or investigate?
Sorry to interject, Mr. Franklin. I think when you're talking about saying the extra words like to, when you're discussing the objectives for the topic here, this is the topic, so I think it's fine the way it is. Only when
Okay.
you're coming to the objectives, that's when you add that extra to.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. So we have come up with a topic number 1, which we've gotten. So from this topic number 1, let's identify the independent and the dependent variables. So that is our topic 1. What are the dependent variables and what are the dependent variables? The independent variables are motivation, leadership, and organizational culture. And the dependent variable is employee performance. Okay. Then the work satisfaction is our mediating variable. Are we together? So these are the variables that are being asked for. So 4 marks there. So identify and classify the variables. So these ones, independent, moderating, mediating, then dependent variable. Okay, are we together so far? 8 marks is confirmed. Okay.
Just a clarification on the mediating and moderating. Are they interchangeable or they've got different meaning? I think this one is a bit confusing.
I was expecting that question. Is it moderating or mediating? What is the difference?
I think for the moderating, it influences the direction and strength of the relationship between the two.
Yes. And mediating?
I think mediating explains the relationship between the two variables, or
So
describes or explains the relationship.
one looks at the direction of the relationship, the other one looks at the strength. So in this case, are we right to say the mediating variable is work satisfaction? Is this correct as it is?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay.
Mr. James, say again. You're saying the mediating is the one that looks at the strength or what? I didn't get that one.
So Franklin is asking, mediating and moderating variable, what is the difference?
So for me, I was saying the mediating one explains which is the strength that you mentioned. It explains the relationship between the two variables. Then the one that influences the direction is the moderating variable.
Okay, so mediating, it explains the relationship between the two. It shows how and why something affects. Okay. Whereas the moderating is the one that gives you the strength of the relationship. It moderates how strong, under what conditions. Okay.
So just an example of how the mediating one explains there. So we'd say if we pick motivation, we would say so motivation will lead to you being satisfied with your work, and then as a result, your performance will be very good. So that's how it's explaining. That's how the work satisfaction is explaining the performance there.
Have you been clarified?
It's clear.
Okay. So work satisfaction is mediating because it serves as a bridge between the dependent and independent variable. The idea that motivation, leadership, and organization structure will first influence what? Work satisfaction. Then work satisfaction will in turn affect employee performance. Then let's look at the statistical relationships that are there. Although we are asked to identify any three, in this case, there are more than three. So let's identify what hypothesis do we have? How many marks are these? 6 marks. So each should have the null and alternative hypothesis. Okay. So let's talk about which hypothesis do we have? H1 talks about the relationship between what? Motivation and work satisfaction. So what hypothesis do we have? Motivation has no significant effect on work satisfaction as our null hypothesis, and motivation has a significant effect on work satisfaction. That is our alternative hypothesis. H2 is between satisfaction and performance. You say work satisfaction has no significant effect on employee performance, and alternative, work satisfaction has a significant effect on work performance. The alternative,
I think, yeah. Okay, I think it's on.
please continue with the hypothesis. So for each of them, for you to get the double marks, you need to identify the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Am I clear? Am I cutting?
Yeah,
You
clear.
had cut before, you're clear now.
Loud and clear.
All right, okay. So make sure that there are only three, so meaning you have the alternative. So the format that you should use, there are 7 hypotheses. You're only asked to do the 3 there. So the 2 marks, get them from doing this. The 2 marks, get them from doing this. Okay? I hope it's easy. You're seeing what's happening there. Is that clear? In leadership,
Yeah.
satisfaction, they're straightforward as they are. So you can choose any of them. You're not limited to which one you can pick. But the key thing you need to know that the null hypothesis always has no effect. The effect is in the alternative hypothesis, and we usually test the null hypothesis and not the alternative. All right. Are we clear? Okay, so the other question is, what is the role of theoretical framework in developing conceptual framework? Yesterday, the question was asking, what is the relationship between the two? Today, what is the role of that theoretical framework? See, these questions are...
Sorry, Mr. Collins. Let me just look back a bit on the hypothesis.
Yes, please.
So from the framework, it's clear to pick out the hypothesis. Now, if it's in a narration form like a case study, how do you pick them out?
If it's in narration form, and we'll look at a question where there was this a problem statement, then you ask to come up with a topic, and then with the conceptual framework.
Okay.
Okay, so explain the role of theoretical framework. We did this yesterday. Somebody, what role does theoretical framework play in?
Can I try?
Yes.
Is it that the conceptual framework is derived from the theoretical framework?
Yes, that is a relationship. Now I'm talking about the role. You're answering yesterday's question. Today we're looking at the role. It provides direction and focus. The theoretical framework will outline established theories and concepts that are relevant in the study. It also helps us identify the key variables. So it helps us identify which variables should be studied, like motivation, leadership, and organization structure. It also helps clarify the relationships. Okay? Are we together? Like some of these notes, let me send them in the group chat at the on time, before I forget. Is it making sense?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. Then also the theoretical framework does what? It strengthens the research design. It's through the theoretical base that logical consistency in the conceptual framework, it makes the study more credible. Actually, 6 points. It also facilitates generalization. It helps to facilitate generalization. I'll send those key points in the group. You can read them at your own time. It also guides for data collection and interpretation. So it is from a theoretical framework or that influences the choice of the measurement tools and interpretation of the findings, aligning them with existing literature. Okay, so this is how we answer the question, the 20 marks. Any questions? So I've outlined the previous, all the papers that have been done between now and the time these courses were merged. So all the 3 question papers have had a conceptual framework. Okay, so this is another framework that we looked at. It was yesterday. We said these are the what? The dependent variables. The independent variables. And the dependent variable is what? Intention to use e-government. So you can use the thematic to come up with a topic, the influence of diffusion of innovation, trustworthiness, and leadership theories on intention to use e-government. So
Mr. Collins, sorry, I lost you. I don't know if it's on my part. You were skipping and too fast, so I didn't hear. Sorry.
is my network clear with the rest? Maybe I switch back to the initial.
No, it's very clear. Very
It's
clear.
very clear.
Okay, so I just navigated from the initial paper that we're looking at here, just to show you that in all these papers here, you've seen that there's conceptual framework. This was 2023 November. This was 2024 May. So the conceptual framework is always reoccurring. So how do we identify a topic? A topic comes from the variables that you're able to see. So formulate a title for this. What are the variables? State an hypothesis for this. What role does the theories play in development of code? So the same questions are there, except that the conceptual framework is just different. Now, how do we make a topic from here? From these key variables, the independent variables. So those of you that missed yesterday's class, please get the videos. We just said the topic was the impact of diffusion innovation, trustworthiness, and learning theories on intention to use what? E-government. So we discussed that this was our what? Our dependent variable. Except that in this kind of scenario, we didn't have any mediating variable. We had what? Control variables. Now, control variables are invisible. Okay? They're external factors that should not affect what? The relationship between these two. And what were the control variables that we talked about? What were the control variables we talked about?
Mediating and moderating.
No, we talked about age. We talked about the knowledge in IT use. Okay? These are external factors that should not affect these factors in affecting. So you don't see the control variables in the diagram. Okay? These are factors that, or confounding variables that should not affect the relationships. The external factors should not affect the relationships here. Okay? Then we said identifying the independent variables was easy. You can,
Sorry, so those are control factors, right?
yes,
Variables.
yes, the control
Okay.
variables, yes. Then formulate statistical hypothesis for this. So we came up with, so this one had how many hypotheses? 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each of these ones have a connection to intention to use what? E-government, except that it needed to actualize them. Okay? Compatibility has no effect on intention to use e-government. Compatibility has an impact, significant effect on intention to use what? E-government. Relative advantage. So these are under the diffusion of innovation. Then we also talked about the role that these theories are. They're just the same. I've sent you those notes. Expect those ones to come as well. The same things. Classify the variables and what are they that I've already done. So based on what we've answered, we've also answered this. Any questions? And it's usually the last question. Like I said, the preamble is just the same throughout.
Collins, did you say you shared the recording?
No, I didn't share it. I'll share it. I'll share it today. I didn't share it yesterday.
How about the notes, like the responses to the questions?
I didn't share them either. I'll share them today. I suddenly got sick yesterday. Okay, so
Mr. Collins, you can also share those summary notes that we're going through unit by unit.
right. So now the worry is on the multiple choice. Most of you are scared of the multiple choice. So this was in 2023.
Hi, Collins.
Yes, please. Is there a question? Twila?
I wanted to ask I wanted to ask something on the conceptual framework, but if you're going to share, hi, I'm saying I wanted to find out something on the conceptual framework, but since we've moved and you said you're going to share the solutions, is fine.
Okay. So I'm just matching. Okay, we never looked at this one here in this paper. It's the same issue. I don't know whether I need to clarify. But now I need you to get used. This is the only toughest part that I'm worried about is the Dr. Mchindo's part, especially the mixture with the multiple choice. So here, we've never done this question, but I want you to, the preamble is just the same. Okay? So, Let's look at this. Identify the variables that are here.
Sorry to interject, Mr. Ndlovu.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, you've got a very good CA and you just managed to get good grades from qualitative. Is that okay? Like, I don't
You
know.
can't fail this course if your CA is good. There's only one person who's not made it that I know in this course. Not because they failed the paper, but because they didn't really put much mind. Because from your proposal, there are good marks. From your, I'm sure your CA is the paper. You can't fail unless you just want to. Yeah. This. So let's look at this here now. We have public entrepreneurship factors, organization performance, and government funding. So let's identify and classify the variables that we have here.
I think organizational performance is a dependent variable.
Okay. It's very obvious. Uh-huh.
Yeah, because you said the dependent variable is the outcome, isn't it? When I remember
Yes.
in the last
Uh-huh.
section.
Yes, outcome. Mm-hmm.
Then public entrepreneurship factors, those are now independent variables.
Uh-huh.
Then government funding can be a mediating variable.
A what?
It's a
I'm
moderate.
thinking it's moderating.
Now this is where Franklin was trying to explain. You'll see how this one will affect the influence. So this is moderating in this case. The other one was mediating. Here it's moderating. That's the only difference. Okay. So are we
Okay, I
together?
think maybe you can shed more light on that one.
Okay.
Sorry, what did you say the independent variables are here?
Somebody to explain. I want people to interact. Annie, what are the variables we have there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We have organization performance as a dependent variable. Then we have government funding as the moderating variable. Then we have structural factors, managerial factors, environmental factors, cultural factors, entrepreneur orientation, and entrepreneur training on innovation as independent variables.
And the government funding is what? A moderating variable. So now
Yes.
explain how government funding is a moderating variable.
So if government releases funding on time to look at issues to do maybe with the structural factors, if you want to do restructuring or other things, if funding is there, then I'm trying to relate it to the strength and the direction. It will enhance the organization performance. The structure will be in place, the funding will be there. I think that's how best I can explain.
Askrida, what is the relationship between conceptual and theoretical framework in research studies? So you've seen how manipulated this question is. It comes as follows. The role that theoretical framework has and the relationship between the two. So those questions are two different. I think, was it Daniel who had asked yesterday? So this one is now asking, what is the relationship? So in the previous concept, somebody had answered a wrong solution for a correct, question. So now this is where your answer falls. What is the relationship between conceptual and theoretical framework? This one here. Somebody would answer that question. Who is it?
It gives direction to the Shan.
So the conceptual framework is derived from the
Yes.
theoretical framework.
That's the answer. Conceptual framework is derived from the theoretical framework. That's the relationship. That's how the two are interrelated. Okay. So I think we've answered everything that is critical here.
Where's the row?
The row I've talked about, I've sent you the 6 rows already in the group.
Okay.
Clarity, all those things I was talking about.
And what is
So,
the construct in what? The question again. Oh, my laptop is waiting. What is construct in research?
This one. You're the one who would ask what a construct is. First, define what a construct is. What is a construct? It's a building block. It's an idea, what you're studying. Okay? Constructs are defined by what you want to measure, the indicators, the questions. Okay? It's the idea or concept that is specifically being defined in the study. Okay? It is used to explain the phenomenon that cannot be observed directly, like attitudes, perceptions, motivations. So a construct in layman's language is simply a building block of the conceptual framework. That is what are you actually studying in its abstract sense. So what is the rationale behind this entire study? What are we talking about? What are the concepts in here? From the logic of these ideas here.
Actual structure of factors.
We're looking at what?
I'm looking at the structural factors as one of the concepts.
Simplify this narration here. What is a construct in research? You've defined that, the idea, the building block. So identify the constructs in the conceptual framework above. There are several ways. You talked about the structural factors. Public.
Managerial, I
Okay,
think the public and entrepreneurial factors.
that's the actual main focus of the study. We're looking at the innovation, initiative, risk-taking behaviors within the public sector, how they create value when it comes to organizational performance. So the main construct is the public entrepreneurship factors in how they enhance what? Organizational behavior. Talking about the structural factors, managerial factors. So that's the main idea. What's the story behind this, in short? Okay. Then I sent this in the group to say almost all the questions from
So what can be the hypothesis test for this framework?
What is the hypothesis? Were we asked? No, not asked. What would be our hypothesis? Structural factors have no significant effect on organizational factors. Structural factors have a significant effect on organizational performance. Managerial factors have a significant effect on organizational performance. Managerial factors have no effects. Just the way we were doing it.
And that last part there, is it asking us to draw the conceptual framework of the proposal that we've handed in, or in
Yes.
case we use the one that we just come up with in the exam?
So state the title and draw the concept. So this question is always coming as well. So you should have your conceptual framework at hand. Come up with a simple one, or because it's a quantitative part. So draw your conceptual framework and show the relationships that are there. So you have your conceptual framework. So if it's correct, please memorize it with terrible exactly.
Is it possible that they can ask us to come up with questions from this framework? Research questions.
Research questions only come in the first qualitative, yes. In the first section.
Can you just give maybe like a guidance on how to maybe come up with questions?
So it comes up.
And also specific objectives. I think that's where I'm struggling also.
So I've sent you this pamphlet in the group, those that are paid up, to have a look at it thoroughly, because all those questions are answered in there, where the research questions, look at this, where research questions should be formulated. The key thing is the research questions. We have different types of research questions under qualitative and qualitative and quantitative. Okay. What types of research questions we have for quantitative? And qualitative? I talked about this yesterday, before we actually look at the actual questions and the context behind the questionnaire. The categories.
Which one talks about the causal when you're talking about when you ask questions?
The causal is quantitative.
Quantitative, isn't it?
Quantitative, yes.
Okay.
So, qualitative as descriptive, exploratory questions.
What have you done?
Are you asking? Is somebody talking? So the types of questions we have under qualitative said we have descriptive questions, we have exploratory questions. So the descriptive questions will ask what is happening, how something was experienced. Okay? We have exploratory questions they want to investigate. Those are under qualitative. We have interpretive questions like how they want to find out specifically. Let me just beam the question we talked about yesterday in categories so that they guide you. Of course, we know that the first research question is a first research objective. So we have descriptive questions. They explore what is happening and how it happened. So what are the lived experiences? So you're able to know these qualitative questions. You have exploratory questions. They are still under qualitative. You want to investigate a new phenomenon, something that hasn't been done. How community members understand the role of tradition. Okay, we have interpretive questions. We want to understand the meanings behind. How do patients interpret this? So the interpretive questions. We have process-oriented questions that explain what happens over time. Okay, then we talked about descriptive questions, like you said, the correlation, causal questions. You know that this one is what? A quantitative question. So you cannot mix unless you have a mixed study. So we have descriptive questions. They want to measure now here the characteristics of a phenomenon. What is the average income? We have comparative questions. We want to compare between two groups, the difference between performances. Correlation questions to investigate the relationship between two causal questions to assess the cause and effect, predictive questions. So these are the categories of questions. Now, if you're given a case scenario, okay, that will expect you to come up with the research from the above. Already, the fact that there's something to do with hypothesis. So this is a quantitative question. So they should be falling under quantitative kind. And you've seen the categories for quantitative, yeah? So we go to, and we've been given areas to look at that are bold, just as a hint. Okay, retaining and developing leadership is regarded to be a great challenge that businesses face. The business leaders operate today in an ever-changing and increasingly demanding work setting on both organizational and personal levels. Hence, they require right competences, skills, and behaviors to meet objectives of their business individuals and to learn adaptive behaviors that can address a certain situation. However, the personality type of an individual may not change easily over time. Nevertheless, a person can develop self-efficiency based on the facts that changes are vital for modern organization to succeed. Improving the probability of success of the attempted effort of change is a great opportunity for the organization. To implement change successfully, there is need for organization or employees to adopt new behaviors in order for the changes desired to be realized. The importance of conducting a study from business context was that it can help business leaders to transform their strategies into reality by helping them understand the role of efficacy in enhancing leadership qualities. Motivation. The importance of conducting this study from a business context was that it can help businesses leaders to transform their strategies into reality by helping them understand the role of self-efficacy in enhancing leadership qualities. Motivation level and internal resource utilization and identification level, where association between leadership and personality type has been a subject of focus by practitioners and scholars. Self-efficacy deserves better exploration. Business leaders can deliberately improve performance by addressing various sources to help develop self-efficacy. Additionally, there is high demand for skilled leaders. Hence, business leaders' responsibility and the role of business leaders have changed with organizational flattening hierarchy. Employees can develop self-efficacy and hence focus on the study to understand how perception of self-efficacy influences leadership behavior among bank managers in Lusaka, Zambia. By determining the association between leadership and self-efficacy, the findings of the study provide important information for managers to support and motivate employees towards cultural achievement. So answer the following. What's the main objective? 3 specific objectives. Formulate the statistical hypothesis of the study, suggest the appropriate research methodology corresponding to the design, and also data analysis procedure, and justify your suggestion. Okay, so we talked about the types of research questions under quantitative. We must have these in mind before we start. The reading almost looks qualitative in nature, but we must also ask ourselves questions whether it's really qualitative or quantitative. Because we talked about there are some issues to do with perceptions there, but again, you need to, it's a thin line of you to understand whether it's quantitative research or qualitative research. So I need your suggestions. Let's come up with the suggested topics that we can have here. This is a quantitative because qualitative has no hypothesis. What topic can we have? Okay, in the interest of time, I can suggest any topics that we can use for this. The influence of self-efficacy on leadership effectiveness among bank managers. Okay, in Lusaka, Zambia, to be specific. Then we can look at the role. So let's look at these. Let's choose one. Here are suggested topics in the interest of time. We've had the read up. We can suggest one of the topics that would be appropriate. Which one can we go for?
The first one.
The first one. We're always going with the first one. Are we all okay with the first one?
Okay.
Okay. So the influence of self-efficacy on leadership effectiveness among. So here we're looking at the relationship in terms of self-confidence between the leadership and performance. Okay. So how do we identify a topic, the appropriate topic? It's just based on what has been given. Okay, from the narrative, you can come up with any topic based on what has been given. So now, from that topic that we've chosen, our aim will actually come from the actual topic. So the influence of self-efficacy on leadership among bank managers in Lusaka, Zambia. So what's the first question asking us now? So after reading this, we can go to our first question. What's the first question? What is the main objective of study? Then we're being asked to come up with the research objectives and the hypothesis. So the main research topic is what makes the main objective. So our topic from what we have will give us our main research objective, which is as follows: to investigate how self-efficacy influences leadership effectiveness of bank managers in Lusaka, Zambia. Then specific objectives, we need to know that our objective must be between 3 to 5, our range. There should be less, there should be more. So to investigate, unless your topic is very complicated, to investigate the level of self-efficacy among bank managers in Lusaka, Zambia, to evaluate the leadership effectiveness of bank managers in Zambia, to analyze the relationship between self-efficacy and effectiveness among bank managers. So, Mr. Franklin, now you see this is where your question was coming from. So make your research questions smart and dynamic to determine, to evaluate, to examine, to analyze, okay? Not to find out. So these research questions must tally with the research what? So at your school, or rather at master's level, usually the research questions are mainly for qualitative, and the hypothesis is for what replaces the research questions. We're doing a quantitative study. So each research question is what will break down into a hypothesis for each of them. So as you can see here now, our first research question talks about self-efficacy among managers. So this one is what will break down to the now and alternative hypothesis. So there is no relationship between self-efficacy and leadership effectiveness among bank managers in Lusaka. Then here, self-efficacy does not significantly predict effectiveness. Then here we go to the second. There is a significant relationship between self-efficacy and leadership effectiveness among bank managers in Lusaka. And here, self-efficacy significantly predicts leadership effectiveness among bank managers. So the key thing is that the alternative hypothesis has no effect, and the alternative has an effect. Are we together? So by having three research objectives doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have three research hypotheses. So we can pick any two, the relationship that we want to look at. Basically, we're looking at the relationship between self-efficacy and leadership. So in terms of the types of questions that we have, there's predictive, there's correlation questions that we have in there. Now, with that being said, what research designs are we going to undertake? What research methodology are we going to take, and what data analysis are we going to use? So they must speak hand in hand. So in this case, we know we're dealing with what? A quantitative research. So suggest appropriate methodology and the corresponding design and data analysis that will be appropriate for the study. So we know it's a quantitative research. So research methodology, we're using the quantitative approach. What design can we use here? Correlational design. What types of analysis can we use? Analysis, you can use a number. Descriptive statistics, you can use Pearson's correlation, and regression analysis. These ones would be appropriate for the study. And what is the justification? You need to give your justification. Okay, so we're using a quantitative because we are measuring what levels of self-efficacy, leadership effectiveness. You are using numerical data and statistical analysis to test the relationships. We're using correlation because we want to measure the relationship between two variables, which are self-efficacy and leadership, without manipulating them. So which one, when would it be an experimental if there's manipulation there? So there's a thin line. Sometimes people should understand when manipulation is to be done and not. When what data analysis procedure are we going to use? Descriptive, Pearson's correlation, and regression analysis. Reasons: the descriptive statistics will summarize the data. Correlation will determine the strength or direction of the relationship. And regression will test the predictive influence. Now, these are the questions that you're usually asked, especially when you're doing your defense. I don't know whatever happens when you forget what to do. Okay. Are we together?
Yes.
I hope I'm not scaring you. I'm helping to demystify things that we have been learning all this while. Okay. So we also talked about types of literature reviews, types of gaps. Remember in my discourse, my notes are very important. So literature review.
Before we start that one, I saw some questions from 2021 where they were asking for the steps to take when you're doing interviews, when you're doing, is it group or
This
group
question.
interviews? Yeah, do those still come?
Yes, it's Dr. Lumbu who likes this one. This one came last year.
This one came last year.
Yeah. So those that got my pamphlet, it's the first question. It's already there. We already discussed
Okay.
the steps that are supposed to be done. I think we did this over and over. You remember them? Okay. I think we can end here. Unless there's anything that needs clarity over. We've covered
Hi, Collins.
everything. Yes, Twila. Fine.
Okay, I have a question. Your pamphlet,
Mm-hmm.
the one that you had sent to us, can you just maybe go to it? Can you go to those slides?
The one I sent today?
Yes, where there's that guy in a hoodie.
Yes.
I noticed that. Can we go to the first question? Is it this one? Okay, so the whole pamphlet is supposed to be qualitative, right? This one.
Yes, qualitative.
Yes.
Of course, your question is
But
to
then
do with
what I got,
qualitative. There are some questions to do with quantitative. So he used to mix some of the questions, but mostly 80% was qualitative.
or they used to mix them. Okay, so my confusion came in when I saw the research designs, because the research designs that are there are actually quantitative.
Yeah, there were some questions that had some quantitative. He would bring 20% of some quantitative related because you teach that. That was before these two courses were merged. But otherwise, my caution is that as you're
Okay.
dealing with questions to do with Dr. Lumbwe, try to align them to the qualitative context.
All right. Okay. I think that's where I didn't understand.
Okay, so quickly, let's also discuss what types, even if we haven't read that, what types of literature review do we have? So literature review is a comprehensive summary of previous research on a topic. So literature review reviews surveys of scholarly articles, books, and other sources that are relevant in particular research. The review should enumerate, describe, objectively evaluate, and clarify this previous research. It should give theoretical base for research and help the author determine the nature of research. Literature review acknowledges the work of others. In so doing, it assures the reader that your work has been conceived. It assumes that monitoring previous work in the field, the author has read, evaluated, assimilated work at hand. Literature review creates a landscape for the reader, giving him or her understanding of the developments in the field. This landscape informs the reader that the author has indeed assimilated all the vast majority of previous significant works in the field. From the above, discuss the types of literature review, characteristics of empirical literature, enumerate the gaps that are found in empirical research studies. Discuss this quickly at your fingertips. The types of literature review.
Empirical, theoretical, and conceptual.
Okay. We haven't talked about systematic. So we have the narrative, which is a traditional literature review, which gives you a summary of qualitative descriptions of existing literature. We also have systematic review, which uses structured and replicable methods to identify all relevant research aspects. We also have scoping review and meta-analysis. Although the key themes that I talked about, there was the traditional, the empirical and conceptual literature review, but the ones that are being asked for here are these four, all right? The types of literature review. We have the narrative, which is a traditional. We have the systematic. We have the meta-analysis, and we have the scoping review. Expect this question has only come once. Most of the questions have been repeated. So when you're dealing with the narrative, it's a type of review, which gives you a broad general overview of the existing. It's one that we usually use. It doesn't follow a strict method. It just summarizes and explains themes and ideas. It's usually commonly used to understand the background of a topic. Then we have a systematic literature review. This one follows an organized, detailed way. It selects and evaluates all the available studies. It's the one that we use that has the three things we've talked about: the literature, the empirical, the conceptual. Okay, so it gives you a clear criteria to avoid bias. Then we have the meta-analysis. Is a type of systematic review which uses statistics to combine data from several studies. It also calculates the overall result or effect size. So it hopes to help researchers to draw stronger conclusions based on what the combined data from different sources. Then we also have the scoping review. Scoping review, it explores a wide range of data to find out what kind of studies and what kind of evidence exists. So this kind of study is very useful when the topic is so broad and not well defined. So it helps to identify gaps in research. Okay. So now it takes us to the other question. The characteristics of empirical review. What are the characteristics of empirical literature review? What is empirical literature review? This is studies based on what others have done. Okay, you look at what findings they had, what methodologies they had. Okay, that's what we call empirical review. It is research based on what has been observed, the real world data collected through experiments, case studies. The features are that it's based on evidence. It uses systematic methods and uses findings from others. It is a peer-reviewed kind of arrangement. Okay. So what are the characteristics of empirical review? So number one is 4 marks. Okay. So the characteristics of empirical review is that it's based on what? On real research, on original research. So this simply means that it is built on actual data that was collected by the researcher using methods like surveys, interviews, and experiments. Secondly, it is objective or evidence-based. So this simply means that the findings are based on facts that can be seen, facts that can be tested, not opinions. So it is evidence-based. Conclusions are observed from a phenomenon. Then it includes what? Methodology. So it has details of the research design, the data collection, and procedures. Okay? So this explains how the study was done. It also includes how it was collected and analyzed. Then also, characteristics is published in peer-reviewed journals. So typically it's found in academic journals after rigorous review. So it answers specific questions and tests the hypothesis. Then enumerate the gaps identified in empirical research studies. What are some of the gaps that are found in empirical studies? Yes. What are the gaps we discussed? Theoretical gaps, methodological gaps. What are the gaps?
Different gap.
Pardon? Contextual, yes. So when discussing these gaps, please remember them. So theoretical gaps, basically, there are never enough strong theories to explain the issue. Okay, so there's lack of adequate theories that explain the phenomenon. So that's a theoretical gap. That's a methodological gap. Looks at the limitations in research methods or designs that were used in the previous studies. Okay, so previous studies use weak or limited methods. Population gaps here, some groups of people or regions were not studied enough. Contextual gaps, some studies did not consider specific settings like culture, like location or economy. Temporal gaps, research would be old and may not reflect today's situations. Empirical gaps, there's not enough real data existing in the existing results. Disagree. So remember, we do research for many reasons. To add on what we've done, argue, or to come up with a new theory. That is why we do research. So this is a literature review. What's the difference between theoretical review and what's the difference between theoretical review and conceptual framework? Theoretical framework, yeah. What's the difference between the two? So theoretical review will explore multiple theories, whereas conceptual framework, it applies a selected theory to guide a study. And that's the main difference. Okay. The difference between the two. Of course, 3 marks you can expand as follows. Theoretical review involves you reviewing and discussing various theories related to a topic. So it helps you identify what has been studied and where the gaps are. It focuses on comparing these theories. Then theoretical framework, this is a specific theory combining theories that the researcher chooses to guide the study. So what this is saying is that the theoretical review, you're just exploring the multiple theories, whereas the framework, you're applying a theory for the study. Then lastly, but not the least, you're now being asked to explain the structuring of literature review or literature sources in the second chapter of your research dissertation. So how is the structure of your literature review? You started with the introduction, then started with the thematic or topical organization. If you're dealing with a case study, you went to talk about the organization itself. Okay, then empirical review, then the gaps, then conclusion. So introduction, which introduces the purpose of the study. The thematic organization, the literature will be grouped under themes and topics relevant to the study. The theoretical review, you discuss existing theories, the topic highlighting their strengths and weaknesses. Empirical review, you a summary of past studies that were done. Maybe you can add here conceptual review or conceptual framework. That was part of your proposal. Then the gap analysis and conclusion. I think this is how most of your proposals were done, isn't it? How many marks for that? 2 marks only. Okay. We've already
Did
done
you
it.
share this paper?
Yes, I shared this paper.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So under sampling, when sampling error, I talked about these issues. Even without reading our case, what I've been talking about or seeing the differences between sample and sampling error. So yesterday we indulged in short word answers. So what is a sample? Differentiate a sample of study and respondents of study. A sample is simply what? A selected group that you want to study. The respondents are those within the sample, in short. Are we together? What is the difference between the sample of study and respondents of study? The difference is simply that the sample is what? The selected group you intend to study. And the respondents are those within the sample. That's what he means when he says be as succinct as you can be. All right. Then what's the difference between parameters to determine, explain the parameters to determine the sample of the study. What are the parameters that determine the sample of the study? The population size, margin of error, confidence level. Remember the formula. How is the Yamin's formula? Who remembers Yamin's formula? I gave you N is got what? 1
Population size.
over 1 minus NE. NE to the power 2, right?
Yes.
The parameters of the sample, the population size, which is N, the total number of what? People in the population. The margin of error, which is our E. This is the error that we can tolerate. The confidence level, which is 0.05 usually. Okay, or common 95%. The expected response rate, so the estimate of how many people are likely to respond. So sometimes if your sample size comes up out to be 100 participants, you don't always expect all of them to come through. Yeah? There's a response rate. Then variability in the population. If the population is diverse, okay, you need a larger sample to capture. Okay. Then what is sampling error in research and the steps to reduce sampling error? What is sampling error? The difference between what? The results of the sample and the actual population result time. We said the difference between the sample statistics and the population parameter. That is what we call sampling error. So I've produced 10 key videos that have almost everything. Okay, for your exam. You don't even need to read irrelevant stuff. Okay, the difference between the results from the sample and the actual values of the population. So what are steps to reduce the sample? Whenever you use a sample, the larger sample size, the more accurate it is. Use what? Proper sampling techniques. So use probability sampling methods like simple random. Ensure representative sampling. Avoid substitution. Don't replace non-respondents with others unless methodologically justified. Then train your what? Your data collectors. Or you can even add, you do a pilot study. The tests what you correct errors. So the key is the larger the sample, the more accurate your thing is. Okay, so what's the difference between cluster sampling and quarter sampling? Provide examples. Astrida. Cluster sampling. What is cluster sampling? People are tired. I think I need to go. I'm happy when you're tired like this, so I go and rest. So cluster sampling is the probability of sampling method where the population is divided into clusters, like schools, towns. Some clusters are randomly selected for a study. So I've loved cluster sampling and systematic. But cluster sampling, for instance, we have 10 provinces. You pick the whole sample, so province one as the groups as they are. So it is random and based on entire groups. Then quota sampling is a non-probability sampling method where researchers will fill quotas for certain traits. For instance, age between 9 to 10, 10 to 11, gender, male, female. So quota sampling is non-probability sampling. It's based on characteristics, whereas cluster is a probability method, which is based on groups, entire groups. That's the main difference.
Collins,
Yes, please.
so the difference between quota sampling and stratified random is just the fact that the random aspect is not, the random sampling is not there. But in terms of the grouping, it's similar. It's the quota can be related to strata.
Somehow, yeah. Yeah. So quota and the cluster sampling, they're in different um, group categories. So when dealing with quota sampling, this is a non-probability sampling technique where the researcher will select what? Participants based on a predetermined quota for certain characteristics like the age, like the gender, like the occupation, so that you ensure that there's representation in specific groups, okay? It's very close to stratified, except that stratified is under what? Probability. Stratified, you're specifying top level management, middle level management, and lower level management. So you pick from each, so that you have a representation in each of them. When dealing with cluster sampling, it's a technique where you are going to divide the entire population into clusters based on what? Geography or natural groupings. So the entire clusters are randomly selected for the study. So for instance, you have what? Provincials for different ministries in Northern Province, in in all the 10 provinces. So if we're using cluster sampling, we're only picking 5 provinces. So we pick all the provincials in those 5 provinces. That is cluster sampling. Are you getting?
Yes.
So those are different, but you should know all the methods. Otherwise, thank you so much. Is this your last paper?